Hello, good day to you all. Thank you for coming to my presentation. This is our presentation that I gave to our faculty learning committee, reaching all of our students. It's my bottleneck presentation for a course that I taught, SPHY 562, Social Psychology of Therapeutic Recreation. This is a master's level course taught to practitioners of recreational therapy who are looking to become administrators or furthering their education. In this particular course, we talk about the social psychology that is related to practicing with recreational therapy. And recreational therapy is an allied health profession that works with individuals with a wide variety of health conditions, anything relating to physical disabilities, intellectual or developmental disabilities, chronic illness, any sort of disabilities associated with aging, any sort of mental health issues, anything along those lines. And so recreational therapy uses recreation as a medical treatment process to engage in helping increase functioning in physical, social, cognitive, emotional, and behavioral functioning levels. And so this course is for students who are looking at getting a master's degree in recreational therapy. Step one, so in the beginning of this course, my students really struggle with the concept of implicit bias, not necessarily knowing what implicit bias is in a textbook sense. Implicit bias is that pre-reflected attribution of particular qualities by an individual to a member of some social group. They understand that in a textbook sense, then they can see that in other people, and we can talk about in case studies, and they can identify implicit bias in other individuals. But they cannot see that in themselves. By and large, this course I've taught for 4 or 5 years, and the students in this course cannot see their own implicit bias towards individuals with disabilities. And they cannot understand and see how perhaps their own biases are impacting the way they work with individuals with disabilities. And so this really is that bottleneck. They cannot see that they have bias against individuals with disabilities when they say to themselves, but I love people with disabilities. That's why I do this profession. That's why I work where I work. That's why I do what I do. I have the students take a short little test. I just ask them, do you have implicit bias against individuals with disabilities? And in this class of 22 individuals, 100% came back saying, no, I don't have any bias against individuals with disabilities. Absolutely nobody in the class at the beginning of this lesson could identify that they had implicit bias against individuals with disabilities. So from there, I went on to kind of step 2, decoding this concept, decoding this bottleneck. And we simply talked about that everyone has biases, right? Everybody says I'm not biased, but everyone has biases. And when we talk about how implicit bias, it's not intentional, but it still is going to impact the way that we interact with other individuals. Particularly for this course, we're focusing here on this ability level on individuals with disabilities. And we can talk about early childhood settings and how implicit bias can affect the way that we interact with individuals with a wide range of health conditions and disabling conditions, right? And so that's the second step that we take, is that decoding component. And then I move into a little bit of a modeling, and I bring in this analogy of a beam and a moat. And this analogy is predominant in Christian religions, but the concept is also familiar in a wide variety of other religious settings, as well as kind of in a cultural setting as well. And so the basic concept of this is this beam and the moat analogy, that somebody may have a small little beam sticking out of their eye, but you yourself have this massive, huge beam in yours, right? Or rather, they have this small little moat sticking out of your eye, and you have the big beam out of your eyes. And you're able to point it to somebody else and say, hey, look it, they've got that in their eyes. They need to get that out. They got to get that fixed. But you're not seeing yourself. And so with this little cartoon we've got here, obviously we got this gentleman in the middle with the purple shirt on. He's got this massive beam in his eye, right? It's blocking the way that he can see, the way that he can function, the way that he can interact with those around him. But he's so concerned about the guy next to him in the yellow shirt who's got this little moat in his eye, right? Same thing with implicit bias. Oftentimes, we can see it in other individuals, but we can't see it in ourselves. And sometimes, particularly as a recreational therapist, If you can't see your own implicit bias, that is going to drastically negatively impact the way you can provide therapeutic interventions to your clients. It's going to make it as if you can't really truly see. So this is the model and the analogy that we go through and that we talk about. There's another analogy that I've heard, liking implicit bias to armpits. We all have them. We don't really want to talk about them, but we all have them, right? And so we talk about these models, we kind of model, or we talk about these analogies that kind of model the way that we should think. And now we're going to step forward, we're going to practice, and we're going to address that implicit bias. And so one thing I have them do is I go to the Harvard implicit test site. Now this is a highly researched, highly valid, highly appropriate test for our students to go ahead and take. It's been taken on a lot of different areas for a long period of time, and is very, very reliable and very, very valid. So I have them log in, I have them select the disability implicit bias test, and then they go ahead and take that test. And then I want them to take a screenshot of the results, and then they send that back to me through a Canvas post, and they also do a reflection where they discuss these 4 items. I have them define for me again, what does implicit bias mean? I want them to be able to write it down and truly demonstrate that they know what implicit bias means. Then I have them write down, how do you feel about your results? Do you agree with them? Do you disagree with them? By and large, the vast majority of my students disagree with their results. The test shows that they have somewhere between a mild to a moderate to an extreme implicit bias towards individuals' disabilities. And oftentimes my students will say, this test is rigged, or it's wrong, or it wasn't right for this reason or that reason, or they try and explain away their test results. Even though before taking it, we talked about how reliable and valid it is. And so I have them talk about their feelings about the results, whether they agree or disagree. And then I have them make this assumption. Let's assume you did not make any mistakes taking the test, and let's assume the test is in fact accurate. Can you explain your results? And then I have them talk about, now that you have the results, what will you do differently when working with individuals with disabilities? And so this is step 4, where we're practicing identifying and addressing implicit bias in ourselves. Step 5, we have this big discussion. They bring all the results back, and we talk about it in class, and we discuss it. And we have a specific lesson directing the importance of understanding our own bias. Everybody has a bias, but you need to understand that so that it doesn't blind you from the treatment you can offer to your clients. Going back to our analogy, we remove that beam from our eye and we understand what our own implicit bias are, that allows us to better serve our clients and offer them a higher level of therapeutic interventions. And then step 6 is that assessment process. I have them simply go back again, and I ask them the question, do you have implicit bias against individuals with disabilities? Now you remember in the beginning, this was 100% said no, 0% said yes after engaging through this exercise, addressing this bottleneck. At the end, 61% said yes, I do have implicit bias against individuals with disabilities. They were finally able to understand. We had 39% that said no. And to be fair to some of these 39%, several of them, their results came back with no implicit bias. And so, you know, according to their test results, according to their own feelings, according to their understanding, they felt they did not have any bias. The test backed that up. And so we discussed about that issue as well. Some of the feedback that I got from students from going through this lesson and this exercise, here in the beginning, one student said, though I have worked with many people with disabilities over the years, I did have both extremely positive and negative experiences working with Wounded Warriors Brigade at the Walter Reed Army Medical Center, Bethesda. Perhaps the negative experiences there created a sense of negativity in reference to people with disabilities. In addition, I believe I may also infantile those with people with disabilities in some cases. There's a man who is taking physical PT classes with me, and I really just feel sorry for him. So I do need to look at that and determine why I act like people with disabilities need my pity. And here we have a student who is clearly starting to understand her own implicit bias towards people with disabilities. Another student said, I was honestly quite surprised by my results and even a little offended. I've always enjoyed and been passionate about working with people with disabilities. When I first saw my test results, I thought they could not possibly be correct because of my passion for working with this population. As I think about it though, I'm realizing that enjoying my work with this population and having biases against them are not mutually exclusive. The test indicates I do hold beliefs that prefer people without disabilities. So I need to be okay with getting uncomfortable and examining these biases further so I can work towards removing them. And so in this student, she's realizing this is going to be uncomfortable. And she also realizes that there is a difference between wanting to work with a population of individuals and possibly having some implicit bias against that same population. A third student stated, after learning more from the readings and the lecture this week, I can see how results were in favor of non-disabled people. I believe I have implicit bias based upon my environment and past experiences. I was unaware of some of the stereotypes and stigmas that I've been placing on people with disabilities in an unconscious manner. From class this week, I was able to recognize that in the past, I've always been quick to offer help or assistance to individuals with physical and or mental disabilities. I'm aware of the power of independence in learning from failure from school. Subconsciously, I was always quick to offer assistance instead of letting individuals try on their own first. And so here's some simple feedback and reflections from our students. Now, what did I learn from this bottleneck lesson? Well, going through this process really taught me the importance of identifying bottlenecks. As I've mentioned, I've taught this class for 4 or 5 years now, and this is the first time that I have gone through and done this process of breaking through on this bottleneck. In the past, I've just gotten frustrated with my students and said, "Why can't you see this?" And it's been a big hang up for them. And as I've tracked those students throughout their graduate program and their career afterwards, they still have a little bit of hang up on that. And so I'm really grateful I was able to go through this process. And I'm hoping to see a big difference in this group, this cohort of students as they move forward. But it really has re-emphasized to me the importance of identifying bottlenecks. Second, I do not assume ideas and concepts are self-explanatory. To me, the idea of implicit bias is self-explanatory. It is implicit bias. And so I've just assumed that my students would understand that. But they would see it in others, but not in themselves. They would believe implicit bias exists in everyone else, but they themselves don't have any implicit bias. So I needed to not assume that concepts that maybe to me seem self-explanatory or easy to understand, perhaps they aren't to our students. Third, the importance of checking student comprehension on all essential topics and to do it daily. When I started checking student comprehension on this topic is when I realized that we had this bottleneck and this issue that was going on. This isn't a concept that I would test on in this class. I used to have this be a short 10-15 minute discussion. I've learned now this needs to be a longer discussion and a presentation in this course. And it's through that student checking comprehension that's allowed me to understand that I need to really focus in on this particular topic. And it's helped me address other topics. There are a wide variety of courses as well. And so I really gained appreciation to having critical assessment techniques or quick ways of checking student comprehension and to doing it, if not daily, certainly weekly or almost daily. Those are the things that I've learned from doing this bottleneck presentation and incorporating the bottleneck steps into my classroom. Hopefully this has been beneficial to you. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to shoot me an email. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions or concerns that you have. Thanks so much. Have a great day.